Hi, everybody. There might be a few more attendees coming in, but they're welcome to just join us as they start. Thanks for being here. I'll go ahead and introduce myself and start us off today. So my name is Gina Moody. I use they, them, or she, her pronouns, and I'm currently the program coordinator here at the University of Idaho Women's Center. So the University of Idaho Moscow campus, where some of us in this Zoom call are today, is located on the ancestral homes of the Nimipu, Palus, and Chichumas peoples. We extend gratitude to the Indigenous peoples who call this place home since time immemorial, and the University of Idaho continues to recognize its academic responsibility to build relationships with Indigenous peoples and ensure the integrity of tribal voices here on campus. So this year, as you may know, you may have heard, the Women's Center is celebrating our 50th anniversary. And I'm excited today that we were able to gather these panelists to commemorate this work that was born out of the Women's Center and has helped so many students and community members in the many years since it started. So I'm going to introduce you to our moderator today. Our moderator is Flick Kemp, and he is a current student at the University of Idaho, pursuing a double major in history and political science. In his free time, he's active with the GSA, serving as secretary in the 21-22 school year, and Transformations, which he is leading this year. The LGBTQA office has offered immeasurable support to his academic career and has helped him discover himself and find confidence in his experiences. And through the office, GSA, Transformations, he has found a supportive and welcoming community and a desire to pursue equality and advocacy after graduation. So thanks so much for volunteering, Flick, and I'll let you take it away.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. I'm very glad to have this opportunity. So I'll start by introducing the panelists, and then we can move on to the questions. After that, there's a time for some Q&A. If you want, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom call where you can put in any questions that you have. And you can also enable closed captioning for yourself if you find we're talking a little bit too fast. So I'm going to start introducing the panelists now.
I'm going to jump in real quick and just say, unfortunately, one of our panelists can't be here today. Julian Arias is a former LGBTQA office student staff member who worked with Julia for many years, and we were really looking forward to having him here today, but he got called into work. So just so you know, he's here with us in spirit. So back to Flick. Go ahead.
So first is Rebecca Rod. She has lived in Moscow since 1984. In 2005, Rebecca was hired at the Women's Center to become the first LGBTQA program coordinator in Idaho. Rebecca received the Women's Center Virginia Woolf Distinguished Service Award for staff in 2009, and then in 2013, the Rosa Parks Human Rights Community Award. Rebecca is an artist and a writer and lives on the edge of Moscow with Teresa, her wife and life partner, for 31 years. Next, we have Tara Malmquist Green, who is a wife, mom, mentor, and advocate and sales executive with Corium International. She graduated from the UI in 2009 and currently lives and works in Portland, Oregon. She spends her time with her family out in nature, whitewater rafting in the summer and skiing in the winter, which sounds wonderful. We have Heather Ebamabe, who's been working at the University of Idaho since 2009 and is currently the director of Trio B'nai Waleita Upward Bound. Heather spent her first 3 years at UI working at the Women's Center in the LGBTQA office and was the LGBTQA program coordinator from 2011 to 2012. Outside of work, she is pursuing a doctorate in adult and organizational learning and leadership with a focus on trauma-informed practice in higher education. Mandy Stray graduated from the University of Idaho in 2013 and went on to get her master's degree from Washington State University in 2015. She's currently the prevention coordinator for the Moscow School District and adjunct faculty for WSU. And finally, we have Julia Kelleher, who's been the director of the LGBTQA office at the University of Idaho for the last 10 years. Originally from Northwestern Iowa, Julia has a bachelor's in psychology from Iowa State University and a master's degree in gender and women's studies and educational leadership from the Minnesota State University at Mankato. Julia is currently a doctoral student in education at the University of Idaho. Cool. So our first question goes to Rebecca. Can you tell us a little about the start of the LGBTQ programming at UI and your involvement with it?
Rebecca, you have to unmute yourself. Sorry. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Thanks. Technology was never my strong point. I think a lot of these folks could tell you that. But it's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's really important to remember our herstory for various reasons, and get this down. And I'm really happy to be invited. In 2005, I was hired by Jeannie Harvey and a panel of, I think Debbie Storrs was on the panel from sociology, and there was a person from the counseling center. But Jeannie Harvey had been lobbying for quite some time, I think, to get a person to interface with LGBT students and bring more services to campus. And originally, when I was hired, it was just part-time. They had developed a safe zone training program and done some safe zone trainings for, I'm not sure how many years, a couple, but they felt like it was time to get someone there to dedicate time to that and expand the program. The idea being to, get more visibility on campus for LGBT students, to also for them to see visibility and awareness that there were safe places for them to be on campus. There were trainings developed, many offices and departments, and there were placards that were then available for these places to have to display their support for LGBT students and things. So that's originally why I was hired. We built the program more and got into more departments and offices with our services. And then I started to have some time to develop some supportive programming for specifically for the students. And others there in the office were helping me have ideas about developing things. And one of the first things that I think, we started having a National Coming Out Day celebration. And as everybody knows, that's October 11th every year. And we set that up so that it would happen on the Commons grounds. And we invited some groups to table there. Our main focus at the time was to have students who were felt comfortable enough to tell their coming out stories. And that was really moving for that to happen. We invited people from the administration to come down. We almost every year had Bruce Pittman or some administrator who would come down and in support and help open the program and just show support for the students. As a result of that activity, we did produce a video called Coming Out Stories, and that again was produced with the students who felt comfortable with telling their stories. And it was really quite an amazing video. In fact, down the road, as people started seeing the video, we were asked by different programs across really the country if we could share that with them. And we started to do that a bit too with that production. So that was pretty exciting. And another program that I developed was Lavender Lunch. And I'm not sure if that's still going or not, but it was a time when we would, over in the Multicultural Center, gather students, we'd provide the lunch. I brought in speakers from the community and the campus, of course, to talk about their experiences of, being gay, or I think we had, families who were having children, people from the community that were professionals that wanted to join us and tell us about their experiences, and just sometimes we just have discussions among the students about whatever was going on, that sort of thing. Part of my position was to interface with the Gay Straight Alliance and find out from them, what kinds of support that they needed and stuff. Another program that I developed was the QUIPS, Queer UI Professionals Group, because as I was there in that position, then I started, getting to know more of the faculty and staff that were LGBTQ folks, and who didn't have, anything available to them. And we would meet for lunch, or we would meet socially downtown somewhere, and just talk about, in their positions, what that was like, and just give voice to those folks. Lavender Graduation was another program that we developed during that time. I think before I joined the staff, there had been one or something a few years before that, but there again, with having this position that was formalizing programs, we got to build that into an annual event, and that really grew. And we had, again, a lot of support from the administration. There would most all the time be the president, or other folks that would attend that, and it just grew and grew. We had speakers. We had Nicole Lefevre, who was in the Idaho State Legislature, came to speak. We had Andrea Gibson, the slam poet, came to speak at one of the graduations. And let's see. Oh, John Burleson. I've got to mention John, because he was a graduate of the University of Idaho, and he, for years before my position, had been contributing money to the Women's Center to support LGBT things, and that's part of the reason that Jeannie Harvey had been lobbying so hard to get a position and stuff. So he was there. So I think we developed a nice foundation of programs during that time. I was there from 2005 to 2011. So many folks in the Women's Center were so helpful, involved in developing these programs. Lisa was there at the time. We started our jobs about the same time, and Amy Sharp was there, and just so many people helped. All the students were involved in either helping with safe zone trainings or helping set up various things. But it was a time that the foundations were really laid for the support of the students and things. And I had so many experiences while I was there that were just sort of off the grid. I remember one time I was working late, and a woman came in who was cleaning the offices, and she said to me, I know what you do here. And I was like, I'm not sure what she meant, but I said, what's up? And she said that she had a gay son, and she knew he was gay, but the father didn't know that she was gay, and she wondered how to help, her son come out to the husband and that sort of thing. But I had all kinds of experiences like that were really moving. And I think once the Women's Center had this position, I don't want to say people started coming out of the closet, but there were just it was like a flood of relief, I think, for a lot of people to know that there was some representation there for folks like that. So anyway, that's basically, in a nutshell, I guess, how it all started. And I'm sure I've forgotten a lot of things, but it was a really good run. It was probably one of the most meaningful things I've ever done in my life. So it was awesome.
Thank you. And then Heather, what was your experience taking over from Rebecca? And then what programs were you involved in before? What programs did you continue and how did they impact your experience at UI?
Yeah, so it was interesting because I moved into the position right as the school year and startup and Pride was happening very quickly, as well as Palooza Fest and things like that. And so, yeah, I just kind of moved in and hit the ground running. I wanted to make sure that the signature events maintained, as well as started a couple of new programs. So we made sure that Lavender Lunches and Out Lunch was still going pretty strong, as well as we developed a queering sex ed program, particularly for the queer identified students on campus, and having that safe space for them to ask questions safely and explore those things like health that aren't always available. And we called it, what you didn't learn in high school health class. Because if anybody was like me and grew up in a rural school, probably didn't cover that. One thing that was really interesting when I was in the position was as a cisgendered, heterosexual woman in that job, I knew that I was only going to have that job for the school year. I wasn't intending on applying for the full-time position. And so I had the opportunity to kind of make that wish list of programs and try to make them happen. But also, toward the beginning of the school year, my partner and I were trying to have a child, and we succeeded. And so I was occupying that space also as an expecting mother, which had some ripple effects that I thought were pretty interesting. For example, when some of the students that I'd grown particularly close to over the previous couple of years found out, first we were at the drag show for that Halloween, and they're like, "Oh, no drinking for you, Heather." And I was like, "Oh, don't worry, it's club soda." And then one of them got, kind of choked up and said, "You are going to be such a great mom, and that child is going to be so loved." And it was that moment that I realized how awesome of a responsibility it is that I am a person in these folks' lives, that and about to be a parent as well, and really what that is, and how occupying that space that I was in, that transitional space that I was in, also, could bring up some things for some of the students who may have had difficult relationships with their families. And so that was one thing that I learned very early on, to be really kind of delicate about. So occupying that space really, really carefully.
Thank you. And our next question is for Mandy. And how was it for you as a student to have programming dedicated to the LGBTQ community and its issues? And how did that shape your college experience?
Well, it was really, it was awesome to be able to have that type of program available. When I first came to college, I actually wasn't out, not fully. I was a little, like a tiny bit to myself. I had reconciled all of that with myself. And then I remember my first year was really a difficult transition to U of I. And I come from a very Catholic family, very traditional Catholic background. And then I moved to U of I, or I moved to Moscow, and I didn't actually have any connections really here. But it was a legacy school, so I came to U of I. And during that transition period, there were moments where I was lonely. I definitely didn't know anybody. And then one day I just decided there was a GSA banner hanging up in the Commons. And I was sitting there in the Commons, and it was like winter time. So it was a fall semester, or this fall semester. And I thought I should try to go to a GSA meeting. And I was like, I don't even know what it is, but I can, glean from the name what it is. And so I remember going and feeling extremely awkward because I didn't know anybody. And this was like my very first time even publicly going to something. I at that time I hadn't even been to a pride parade. And so I dropped in and there was Rebecca, and she was cheery and wonderful and welcoming. And at first I was like it was nice, I was like, oh, this person's really nice. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll give it a whirl, give it a shot. And I stayed for the meeting. And I loved it. I mean, I started getting connected, I guess, through GSA and then the Women's Center. And I remember walking one day to one of my classes and I was on the phone with my mom and I had mentioned that, oh, there's this, and I just threw it out there. I was like, there's this women's center, there's this program going on, and I'm really interested in going to it. And I don't even remember what program it was that the Women's Center was sponsoring at that moment in time. But I remember being like kind of outing myself in a different way, like outing myself not as a lesbian at that point to my family, but even just outing myself that I was going to the Women's Center and knowing what my family was going to say and just like putting it out there like, hey, I'm not gonna go to the campus church tonight. I'm actually gonna go to the Women's Center event. And I think it was the Take Back the Night. It was Take Back the Night. And even though like it's a great cause, right? Just being able to say, I'm starting to affiliate myself with the Women's Center was a really great having that option. Like, because for me, I wasn't ready to come out as a lesbian, but I needed a bridge to get me there with my family. And so I think having the option to say, oh, I'm gonna go do this with the Women's Center, it felt safe for me. It was nice. And I really I'll never forget those little moments that I had that helped to kind of shape my experiences. And so I'm super thankful. There, like Lavender Lunch, I would go to Lavender Lunches. That was really fun when Rebecca started that, and I started going to that, learning all about the different pieces of our community was really awesome. And then I couldn't get enough. And I did everything that I possibly could through the center and with the programs that Rebecca was putting on. And then later on, I mean, as I was getting ready to graduate, having some support with the LGBTQ Center with my thesis project, like that was awesome as well. Like I definitely I had a lot of support from all people at the center, and it was a game changer for me for sure.
Thank you. And Julia, this one's for you. Where do you hope that the LGBTQI office is going to go from here?
Thank you. Yeah. So before I started, I just wanted to provide kind of a quick programming update of kind of like the historical programs that exist here at UI and how these are continuing on to this day in 2022. And so last week we celebrated National Coming Out Day, very similar to how it started. And we had our National Coming Out Day event on Tuesday, had 15 tables signed up, and I'd say probably over 200 people walked through and celebrated and got free stuff and hung out. So we are continuing that program. I brought Lavender Lunch back after probably a couple of year hiatus. A lot of the students graduated and the attendance was low, so I kind of phased it out. And then COVID happened and everything blew up. And then once now COVID's kind of calming down, we're introducing it to a new generations of students. But this time instead of doing it in the Student Diversity Center, we're doing it in the Women's Center. So it has very much a living room kind of feel. So I'm grateful to my Women's Center colleagues for allowing us to host my event in their space once a month. And then finally, I just wanted to give a acknowledgement to John Burleson, because without him, he truly, for many, many years, his gift funds were the sole programming money I had. And he gave continuously up until his passing in 2020. And so like without him, I don't there's a couple of dark years where the operating budget for the office would not be enough to cover what was needed for campus-wide education. What other things that I can update with? I do have copies of the coming out stories in my office. I have both the VHS and DVD. So if you're interested in wanting to watch some old stories, I could probably figure out how I can have some of my student employees digitize it. There's got to be a video lab somewhere on this campus. And then finally, our Safe Zone program is still growing strong. I train people from all over the state. And to this day, we started keeping track of numbers. I think it was like 2008, 2009. I have numbers back on this random Excel file that I keep in my online storage of ever expanding names. And we've had around over 650, between 650 and 700 faculty and staff and students trained. And I've gotten loosier in my record keeping, I think, so it might be more. I try my best, but sometimes we train around 50 or so a semester of all over. And anyway, so my question, sorry, I just wanted to provide just a quick little update on that so you all could kind of see the progression. My hope that the office is just continuing its support and of students. Being here for 10 years, I've seen 10 cohorts go through, 10 graduating classes, the program formerly known as Lavender Graduation, we now call it Lavender Celebration, still happens. And even with like COVID and we still are, combining it with our equity and diversity unit, which is our larger unit that the LGBTQ office is under, our multicultural student graduation, we have students graduating all the time. So it's that support, I think, that really makes the difference. And I want to continue that. And including, I've had for the last 3 or 4 years now, it's called the LGBTQA Scholars Program. And it's a non-scholarship advising program, very similar to how the Office of Multicultural Affairs operates with their diversity scholars. So I work closely with a cohort of students every year. It depends on the year and the size. Flip was a former scholar of mine. And basically, it's just kind of an extra person to help you out. We call it secondary advising. So this idea of like intensive secondary advising. So I meet with students monthly. I keep track of their grades. I make sure they're going to class. I hunted down a student on National Coming Out Day and reminded him that he had to go to his polio because he wasn't doing too hot with that. And the students both love it and hate it because if they sign up for it, I bug them pretty good. But that just helps the retention rates. And, we're still working on a place I really want to continue is the development of more tracked LGBTQIA plus identities. Obviously, everything like that's going to be voluntary, just like other forms of personal diversity and identities. But I really want to do more formal tracking for the university to see that the need for programming and support is there and these students succeed with that programming and support. Obviously, too, another area I'd hope for the office to continue to develop is really, we've been working for years, and I have to thank ASUI and our former student body presidents for this and the student queer and trans student leadership, but is formalizing a larger space for the center, for the office. We still are, in our space inside of the Office of Multicultural Affairs, which I really appreciate them allowing me to share their space now for a decade. Having offices in space. And my partner and I, several years ago, I think at least 5 to 6 years ago, one day we decided, heck, we're just going to make our own center because we're tired of waiting for spaces. And I acquired some furniture. I'm not going to say how. And we made a space. And COVID kind of, before I would track numbers, we had this big sign up that says, let them know we're here. Let them know we're using this space. And we would have students mark in, and we would get hundreds of not independent usages, but also the just people using it. And I think that really made a difference. And so I'm trying to get students back into it. These new students are post-COVID students. They're not used to this outside of their kind of bubble space. So we're still orienting them to that. And finally, something I wanted to speak about is also too, since the last 2 academic years, I worked closely with our registrars and ITS, or Office of Information Technology, I think it is called now, to implement preferred names, which obviously in my book it's just called names. But allowing students to change their first names on their Vandal account has been a life-changing experience. for students, I guess I can speak for them, but also for myself. Like I spent many years talking to students and counseling them, working them through this process of like, well, now you have to email each one of your instructors and out yourself as trans or non-binary, or out yourself as a different name. But now with the first name changes, students can go into VandalWeb, change their first name. It's an overnight process. And while there is it's sometimes a slower process with this because technology is slow, we're still working on the kinks. And I think an ultimate goal for me, technology-wise, was to allow for our programs, like within our rosters and things like that, to automatically flood in pronouns, so students don't have to, because students, we expect them to know how to work all these different programs internally, which we educate them on. But it would be really nice if it was similar to the names, where they could just go into VandalWeb and change their pronouns and everything floods over. But other than that, we just keep going, keep plugging away with our programs, and I just want to keep the name out there and keep students feeling like they can come and be themselves, because it's not so much support. I think a lot of it is for the office is not these individual one-on-one interactions, which are mentally important and honestly keep my job worth doing, because it's so refreshing to meet all these students and make an impact. But also at the same time, it's that behind the scenes of influencing policies, influencing teaching, and educating faculty and staff, and keeping that up. That's something I really want to keep moving forward.
Thank you. And this question is for Tara. What did you wish you could have had in terms of supporter programming? And is there something that you think students still need today that could be implemented in the future?
You'll have to unmute yourself, Tara. If you need to like exit and come back in or something, we can make that work. Flick, if you want to ask the next question to everyone, and we can see if Tara can get voice in this conversation.
Yeah, so while we wait, this question is for all of our panelists, and that is, did you face resistance while participating or running these types of programs?
Mine's working now, by the way. You have me?
You're good.
Go ahead
All
if
right.
you have any answer for this question.
I didn't even get that question because I was logging back on, but
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm happy to go. Flick, do you want to restate my question?
Yeah, for sure. So what did you wish you could have had in terms of supporter programming? And is there something that you think students would still need today that could be implemented in the future?
Yeah. During my time there, we really focused on identity development because we found that the queer population was either in two boats. They'd been out for a while and were ready to be activists, or they were just coming out and they really needed that social support system. And I think the part that, looking back, that would have been beneficial is I know we had access to counseling at the counseling center, but I think like some sort of small group where we could have all gotten together and done sort of small group activities, talked about coming out, talk about transitioning, things like that, would have been beneficial and feel that safe space. And then maybe I would, you could have felt more comfortable to reach out for individual counseling like that. So I think that would have been really beneficial. I will say that, I'm happy to hear that things like National Coming Out Day are still happening. Part of my own personal journey, I didn't even know about really Pride when I came to U of I, let alone any other days to celebrate. And National Coming Out Day for me was something I first celebrated at the University of Idaho. Later came out to my own brother on that day. And then last year actually had our son, which our donor was from someone I met in GSA. And so these things really come back full circle, and they're all really impactful, and it's all because of the center and the influence it had on my student journey. So I think the more ways you can impact someone during their identity development, the more ways it continues to impact in the future.
So the next question, which is for all of our panelists, is did you face resistance when participating or running these programs?
I can go again. Like I mentioned previously, I was part of not only the GSA, but I worked with ASUI as a social action intern. And so we were always collaborating with the LGBT Center, the GSA, trying to create more visibility on campus. And I will say that other clubs would step up and rival us or try to counter us. You know, maybe it was the Republican group on campus, or you know, that's one that stands out in particular that I remember, you know, conflict happening. And so we did face some of that. Some of the religious groups on campus, as well as religious groups in Moscow, would, you know, show up across the street and rally against us and whatever we were trying to be supportive of or bring light to for other students so that they felt safe. So we felt some of that resistance. You know, that was 06 to 09 when we were experiencing that. Also, it was during like Prop 8 was happening in California. And so, you know, we were feeling that nationwide and all trying to express our voices and I guess rise up against the hate we were feeling around the state, the city, the nation that way.
When I was there, as far as I think what I'm thinking of is the concerns I had about, you know, the administration or, you know, pushback from wherever it might come. At the time I took the job, I actually was, I was out, but not out. I mean, it wasn't anything that I had, that I was doing in my life a lot, but I felt like once I had the job, then it was kind of my job to be out for all the folks who couldn't be out and that sort of thing. In fact, my partner and I got married like 5 times as it became legal in different states and stuff. And just, you know, we just, you know, did the things that we could do to, you know, represent and just be out there for other people. But I think my concerns were, you know, would the administration go along with this stuff or that sort of thing? I walked a fine line between the students and the administration and that sort of thing. Sometimes I didn't maybe do all the things the students might have wanted me to do, or sometimes I might have done things that the administration, you know, it was an interesting sort of line to walk. But in retrospect, I feel like generally had a really good run of it at that time. And things have come so far now, it's just hard to imagine the way things were back then in the early 2000s. And of course, you know, I was in college in the 70s, so that was, you know, a whole different time. But generally, I felt like it was, for me, and what happened on campus and what was developing, it was really a pretty good run.
When I was in the position for that year, there are a few instances that kind of come to mind when I think about resistance that was met. I would rely upon, you know, university listservs, faculty staff listservs, and I remembered trying to promote QUIPS events and make sure that folks and new employees had access to that. And I remember getting an email, several emails back saying, this is not right. I don't want to be on this list. You shouldn't send it here. And I said, well, this is a service for all University of Idaho faculty and staff. And so feel free to ignore the message. So things like that. But also, there were times where we had presenters wanting to use gender neutral pronouns of Z and here. I remember getting some emails like, oh, there's misspellings on this email. And I was like, no, those are gender neutral pronouns that are the pronouns that our speaker uses. So I remember getting that as well. One of the approaches that I took to programming was trying to make it really intersectional. So trying to highlight and queer voices of color and bring in a diverse range of speakers. And so sometimes that was well received, and I think that was one really great thing that we did that year was that intersectional programming.
All right, well, we have one last
I'll touch on this
question.
briefly. Things are getting better. The resistance stuff. Oh, can I answer this Flick real quick or no?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Oh, sorry, my internet like cut out and I was like, distance, and that we have this amazingly solid support coming from our administration, and especially the administration leadership here for the Equity Diversity Unit. Our Chief Diversity Officer and Executive Director for Tribal Relations, Dr. Yolanda Bisbee, is an amazing advocate and ally for the community and really, helps out in any way she can. But obviously, within like any sort of work within this, like there's always that delicate line between Julia as the State of Idaho, University of Idaho employee, and Julia as the person. And I think that's where kind of like the resistance and things can come from, is that, personally, I want to be like, oh, of course, like, let's do this. It's ridiculous. Why aren't we doing this? But like, also as a professional, like that, the boundaries with that. But I think as time goes on, we may have resistance from outside organizations or from statewide organizations, especially social media, people talking, whatever. But the student support there is always there. Like I've worked very closely for the last, I would say, the entire time I've worked here, always having some sort of support or student in leadership in ASUI, whether that's up to the student body president to down to the senators and student representatives. We've had LGBTQA plus individuals of all identities be part of our ASUI student leadership, and they truly are the ones that are, with the university administration backing us. And I think while progress is slow, like everything in the world, we can't expect progress to happen overnight, but like that progress wouldn't be half as where it was if it wasn't for the student activists and student leaders who have really advocated through the years with their power as students here at the university.
I was going to add one more thing. I was thinking about times when we could have met a lot of resistance and actually were greeted with a lot of support from the university. There was a time where the LGBT office and GSA worked with ASUI to bring Dan Savage for a speaking event. And it was a hot topic on campus. It was controversial because he was talking about sex and he's an out gay man. And the whole facility in the administration building was packed. There was no room left to sit. And administration let students keep coming in and sitting in the aisles when they could have shut it down for fire marshal. And so those situations kept happening over time. And that's where we really started to feel the support from the university in a different way. So that was a big shift around that time and that event, which I think was like 2008.
Cool. Thank you all. So we do have a question from the Q&A, which is from Heather, and they ask, can the panelists talk a bit more about the initial funding of the office and how campus support was generated to create a student fee, and how the Women's Center connection provided a space within the Memorial Gym and how that was moved out to the Diversity Center?
I'm trying to think about, like, I think the student fee establishment was prior to my time here, because I came in when we had a student fee established. And I know, like, Heather, your office, were you the first one that went over to here into the TLC suite when you started your position?
Yes, so that was actually right when the transition was happening. So I believe Rebecca had secured the student fee. I believe she had presented and got that approved, which was fabulous. And then the move was happening that August prior. So moving into that space, creating that space and sharing that space with other diverse student populations. And so it was great kind of starting to build and share that that space. And the lavender lunches and out lunches had been happening in the Student Diversity Center for several years at that point. So it was a very natural transition. And it was a really great opportunity to do, again, intersectional programming, so folks can, learn about each other and really understand that being of one identity group doesn't mean that you are not a part of another identity group.
When I was a student there, we were still in the Women's Center, and it transitioned. The Lavender Lunches had transitioned to the Diversity Center at that point. But I remember going to Lavender Lunches in the Women's Center. One significant change around that is I felt that male identified participation increased when we were able to move, just because I think it didn't feel so gender focused maybe in that way. And so I definitely felt that increase, and that was a big positive. But when this all started, I mean, there was no funding. The donation that came from was it. That was all there was, and maybe a little bit of GSA money, which there was not really any there either. And so am I correct that it started at like 25 cents or 50 cents in the student fee? Is that what we originally got, Rebecca?
I actually can't remember, but I do remember that, and thanks Heather Mabe for that credit. I think at the time I was working heavily with Heather Gasser, who was the director at that time, and she was a real strong driver in helping get that going. I don't remember, it was a very small amount to start with, and you're right, prior to that it was John Burleson money. And then whatever could be scraped together out of, Bruce Pittman, out of the student affairs and that sort of thing is all I remember. Yeah.
I remember when that was approved, we felt like we had solidified a place for ourselves in the university.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't take it away anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Gosh.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to jump in quickly here because I'm Lisa Salisbury, current director of the Women's Center, and I was the director when the LGBTQA office formally separated from the Women's Center. So my recollection is that we had a student fee that was dedicated to LGBT programs and services, but it was part of the Women's Center's budget that we oversaw and administrated. And then that didn't become the LGBTQA office budget until the formal separation, which was in the first year that I was the director. So that was the 2013-2014, is that right? Yes, school year. And so the office had already moved physically over to the suite with the Office of Multicultural Affairs and the Teaching and Learning Center. So they had by that point 2 years, I think, or 3 years in that space, like a separate physical space, but their budget was still tied to the Women's Center. But it was a small amount. I don't recall exactly how much it was. It was really only enough for programming. It did not support the director's position. And so when the office formally separated from the Women's Center in the 2013-2014 school year, we requested an additional $2, I think, was it, Julia? Do you remember? It was around $2.
It was about $2, $2.50, something around
to
there.
support the director's position, their salary and fringe benefits. And so effectively their budget then about doubled, because the amount that they had been getting from student fees only supported programming, but then it was it was enough to support a paid staff position with fringe benefits. So that's kind of financially how the separation worked. But as I mentioned, physically it had separated 2 or 3 years before.
Yeah. And now, like, we, the budget itself is completely self-sufficient within ASUI student funding through fees from the student body. And we get fees from, undergraduate, graduate, law, whammy, all together. So I'm kind of under the banner that I will support students from all of our different schools and campuses here in the state of Idaho. And actually recently this year, we received an increase to allow for our first ever not the coordinator or director position to be hired. So we're in the process of still hiring a administrative assistant that we'll be sharing with the brand new Black African American Cultural Center, the Native American Student Center, and myself will be sharing a full-time administrative assistant, which is pretty big for the office, starting from its humble beginnings, over 12, 13, 15 years ago. So I think it's as we go every year, the ASUI's funding board has always been very generous in understanding that our budgets my budget in the office is extremely small. But I'm really good at programming and collaborating with very little funding to go into it. So it just made me more crafty in my my programming abilities.
I think that's something that's been really beneficial about being part of the equity and diversity unit. Our unit was created in 2014, and we've been able to share resources. A lot of our offices, have in the past, and some would argue continue to be under-resourced. And so having us all located in one unit has been really beneficial in terms of sharing staff and sharing programming and collaborating with one another, and doing a lot of cost sharing so that we can provide those services to our entire community in a way that would be impossible if we were just working on our own.
So I had a question for Flick, because you're the only current student here. And I just wondered if you wanted to talk briefly about your experience, your roles within the different organizations that you participate in.
Yeah, so my freshman year, I was a scholar. So I was part of like the scholarship program that Julia runs. And that was really great. That helped me network with a whole bunch of my peers. And I wouldn't have been able to meet. A lot of them are still my friends today. I wouldn't have had that social network and that support system for me my first year. And that year was also very chaotic, just kind of coming out to myself and kind of figuring out who I was, and having the LGBTQ office as a resource and as a safe space for me to feel comfortable exploring these things was immensely helpful. And then my second year, I became the secretary for the GSA. And so with that, I was able to hold meetings again, regular meetings, and try and organize events and stuff for students, just to kind of reestablish like peer support and peer networking for students here on campus, and myself as well, just helping everyone get to know everyone else and letting them know that they aren't alone. And then this year I'm working with Transformations, which is basically like a group therapy sort of thing. Trans and gender nonconforming and people who are questioning their gender can come in and just talk about being trans, being non-binary, their day. It doesn't really matter. It's just a safe space for people to figure out who they are and have a community that will support and understand where they're coming from. So, I mean, that's pretty much where I've been involved, like directly. But on the whole, I think the fact that, there's Lavender Lunch, there's GSA, and they meet every week now, and there's just spaces for people to go that aren't going to judge them inherently. And that's been really helpful for me, and I think really helpful for a lot of other people.
Awesome. Do we have any very last questions from the audience before we leave? If anyone wants to write it in the Q&A or the chat. Or Mandy had to take off early. Sent a message saying, thanks for having me today. I'm going to have to go to my next appointment. Thank you for all you do at the Women's Center and the LGBTQIA office. So thanks to Mandy for that.
If
All
we
right.
can, we could maybe leave off with one last question for Julia, which is how can people support the LGBTQA office and its programs?
Yeah, so for, folks who are local here to Moscow, continuing to come out and support, to events or student run events. So like GSA and things, providing that support is needed. I know like for National Coming Out Day, we had the Free Mom Hugs group from Moscow come in, and I was surprised. I'm not a very huggy person, so I was like, oh, I don't know how many people are gonna come hug. And then there was like lines of people waiting to hug these wonderful people and showing that support. So I think it's that continued like mentorship and example of our queer and trans and supportive advocates across the Moscow community that show our undergraduate and graduate students that like sometimes life feels like we're stuck in a place, but the reality is that, we keep going and keep fighting and just keep moving. Also too, the office, we always appreciate financial support through our different fundraising opportunities. The office has we do funding for both LGBTQ office and programs, which is a great fund that kind of helps me either contribute to campus-wide programming that is talking about, a diverse range of LGBTQA topics, including really emphasizing intersections of identities and bringing voices to those marginalized communities, even within the LGBTQA plus community. But also too, we have our scholarship program, which is our emergency scholarship, which was established prior to my arrival, but I continue. And that is 100% donor funded. And I usually give out 1 or 2 of those scholarships a year. The students get up to $1,500 per semester. And and the scholarship was created to be for students who were disowned, but I'm noticing that we're expanding this out, that sometimes students may not have the best financial or emotional support from their families, but sometimes too, life things happen. So we've given it out for students for tuition, for medical expenses, for rent, helping students so they don't become homeless, or housing impaired, having to do couch surfing or anything like that. So basically it just comes in as a need with all students who identify within the community, and it's a fairly simple process for them to operate under. So any ways that people can support those, all that money goes back to either campus education or through financial support for our students here across the state. All right.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and end it today. I want to say thank you so much to our panelists. It was such a pleasure to have you here, and having this on Zoom, while not as exciting as having it in person, is a fantastic way to connect and a way to record this, and we'll upload it to our website so that we have it for years to come, and people can witness, how we've done, what we've been up to, and where we are hoping to go. So thanks again to all our panelists. Thanks again to all of our attendees. We appreciate you, and hope you have a great rest of your day. See you. Bye.